The death of Lord Jon Arryn was the catalyst event at the beginning of A Song of Ice and Fire that ignited the tensions between the Starks and the Lannisters. The event that would ultimately lead to the execution of Ned Stark, the War of the Five Kings, and the thousands that died with it, including several of the major players within the series in events such as the Red Wedding and the assassination of Renly Baratheon. Jon Arryn is mentioned over 100 times throughout the course of the novels, despite the fact he died before the first page, and just about every misfortune that the characters encounter can in some way be traced back to Jon Arryn and his murder. Lord Jon Arryn's wife Lysa Tully poisoned him with the Tears of Lys in a secret plot orchestrated by Petyr Baelish. Littlefinger did this specifically for the purpose of creating Stark-Lannister tensions, knowing that as the newly appointed Hand of the King, it was likely that Ned Stark would discover the truth about the parentage of Cersei Lannister's children, just as Jon Arryn had himself. Lysa Arryn, Lord Jon's wife and younger sister to Catelyn Stark, was complicit in the plot to murder him, because she was absolutely fanatical about protecting her son to the point where she refused to be parted with him. It had been rumoured that Jon Arryn was in the process of arranging for their only son, Robert Arryn, to be fostered on either Dragonstone with Stannis Baratheon or at Casterly Rock with Tywin Lannister, depending on which account you believe. Although it is worth mentioning that at points throughout the text, it is heavily implied that Varys may have also played a role in Jon Arryn's death. Early in the narrative, Arya overhears Varys and Illyrio, who are seemingly plotting to bring war to Westeros so as to weaken the land for a Targaryen invasion. This so-called evidence pointing towards Varys, however, is seemingly nullified when Lysa Arryn actually admits to the murder. Towards the end of A Storm of Swords, she screams at Littlefinger, "Tears, tears, tears," she sobbed hysterically. "No need for tears, but that's not what you said in King's Landing. You told me to put the tears in Jon's wine, and I did. For Robert, and for us. And I wrote Catelyn and told her the Lannisters had killed my lord husband, just as you said." It could be that the rumours regarding Robert Arryn's proposed fostering could have been a clever manipulation by either Varys or Littlefinger, and Lysa was known to be utterly infatuated with Petyr Baelish, and was easily swayed by him when he convinced her to take such drastic action. The man that proved to be his undoing, Petyr Baelish, was ironically only present on the small council in King's Landing in his role as Master of Coin due to Jon Arryn's appointment at the behest of his wife, who convinced him of Littlefinger's worth. Although they did not have a direct hand in the poisoning, the Lannisters certainly contributed to Jon Arryn's inability to recover when Grand Maester Pycelle, ever loyal to House Lannister, sent away Maester Coleman, who had been successfully treating Jon's condition. Lord Jon died in 298 AC at the onset of A Song of Ice and Fire. Prior to this, he had served as Hand of the King to King Robert Baratheon for the entirety of his reign thus far. He was also the head of House Arryn, whose titles included Lord of the Eyrie, Defender of the Vale, and Warden of the East, and former Keeper of the Gates of the Moon. He was born in or between 218 AC and 220 AC, the eldest son of Lord Jasper Arryn, but very little is known about his parents and of his childhood. His younger brother Ronald was a knight before his death, of what was described as a bad belly. Jon's younger sister Alice was married to Sir Ellis Waynwood. They had 9 children together before she died, giving birth to the last. Lysa Tully was Jon Arryn's 3rd wife, his first being Lady Jane Royce, who died giving birth to Jon's stillborn daughter. His 2nd wife was his cousin, Rowena Arryn, who died of a winter chill without producing an heir for Jon. In the absence of any living children of his own, Jon appointed heir after heir from branches of his family, such as his nephew Elbert Arryn, to succeed him, and each died in turn. During Robert's rebellion, Jon was married to the youngest daughter of Lord Hoster Tully, as arranged by Maester Wallace. Lysa was known to be fertile, as she had previously been pregnant to Peter Baelish. Her father had forced her to abort the child with moon tea, however. The marriage was thought to be the key to producing an heir that Jon so desperately needed at this point. They were married in a joint ceremony with Lysa's sister Catelyn Tully, who wed Lord Eddard Stark, after his brother, Catelyn's original betrothed, was murdered by King Aerys II. After Ned's brother and father were killed in the Red Keep as a result of their fateful journey to the capital to reclaim Ned's sister from the apparent abduction at the hands of Aerys' son Rhaegar Targaryen, the king, Aerys, then commanded that Jon Arryn bring him the heads of Ned and Robert Baratheon, who were both wards at the Vale of Arryn. Ned Stark had been a ward at the Vale along with Robert Baratheon since the age of 8. Both of the boys were brothers in all but name to each other, and Lord Jon their second father. Ned loved Jon Arryn so much that he was Jon Snow's namesake, the man that had raised Ned Stark, even though he wasn't his true father. When Ned came of age, he divided his time equally between Winterfell and the Eyrie, and it was arranged for Robert Baratheon to marry his sister Lyanna Stark. So when Aerys demanded Ned and Robert, Jon refused his king, and a rebellion was launched with the force of House Arryn and Houses Stark and Baratheon behind him. If we go back to the War of the Ninepenny Kings several years prior to all of this, Jon Arryn, Steffon Baratheon, Rickard Stark, Robert and Ned's deceased fathers, Hoster Tully, and Tywin Lannister are all seemingly allies. Perhaps with the exception of Tywin Lannister, they could even be referred to as friends. The move to make Ned and Robert wards, and later the marriages of the Tully daughters and the betrothal of Robert and Lyanna, would seem to cement this friendship. There was some rather powerful joining of houses being formed under King Aerys' nose. At some point, plans were in formation to marry Lysa Tully to Jaime Lannister, but this fell through when the young Jaime was named to join the Kingsguard. Many believed that these Southron ambitions, as Lady Barbary Dustin calls them, were wheels set into motion long before Robert's rebellion and even the tourney at Harrenhal. After the rebellion had overthrown the Targaryen dynasty, perhaps to a much fuller extent than had been originally intended, Robert Baratheon ascended to the Iron Throne and appointed Jon as his hand. Jon Arryn did not seek to punish Tywin Lannister for his ruthless sack of King's Landing and the murders of Elia Martell and her children, as censoring Tywin would only serve to weaken Robert's political standing and support. Instead, he brokered the marriage between Robert and Cersei Lannister. The Martells, specifically Oberyn it is claimed, sought revenge for Elia's rape and murder, but Jon travelled to Dorne and spoke with the Prince of Dorne, Doran, and somehow persuaded him to keep a tenuous peace. Some speculate that Daenerys' garden beyond the Red Door with the lemon tree growing outside was in Dorne and not Braavos, and that while in Dorne Jon Arryn had somehow discovered her, and Doran chose to stay any revenge on a promise that Jon would not reveal this secret ward. It is also worth noting that when Robert first wanted to send assassins after the escaped Targaryens, Viserys and Daenerys, that it was Jon Arryn that convinced him against taking such action. It's possible that Jon convinced Doran to remain quiet, simply because Dorne was not as powerful as the rest of Westeros perceived them to be. Their forces were involved in the rout on the Trident and would have been significantly reduced. Plus, they had nothing to gain from another war at that point, except obviously revenge. Doran knew that it made no sense to spill blood for no gain. Before Robert's rebellion, Jon Arryn was of course a younger man, said to have resembled Harold Hardying, the heir presumptive of Lord Robert Arryn, who's described as handsome and muscular, with sandy blonde hair and blue eyes. By the time he was wed to Lysa, it is said that he had aged, he had bad breath and half of his teeth had fallen out. The marriage did eventually prove fruitful, however, when after 5 miscarriages and 2 stillbirths, Lysa gave birth to the sickly Robert Arryn in 292 AC. Jon served as hand to the newly crowned Robert Baratheon, who passed much of his ruling to Jon. Jon Arryn struggled to maintain the realm as Robert Baratheon set about bankrupting the crown by throwing lavish feasts and tourneys. Jon Arryn's final words to his wife Lysa and King Robert I Baratheon on his deathbed after his sudden demise were, "The seed is strong." Lysa takes his words as referring to their son Robert Arryn, but this is unlikely. It was said to be Stannis Baratheon that first suspected something wrong in the physical features of his nephews and niece, Joffrey, Myrcella and Tommen, and brought his suspicions to Jon Arryn, which led to their investigation about their true parentage. The book Jon Arryn was reading when he died was Maester Melian's The Lineages and Histories of the Great Houses of the Seven Kingdoms, with descriptions of many high lords and noble ladies and their children. Some ask, why didn't Jon tell King Robert about his suspicions regarding Cersei and Jaime Lannister straight away? But in a world absent of any way to definitively prove such a claim, he would need to present a full and convincing case to the king. He must have been aware that a casual suspicion would never do. The Lannisters are a powerful family, and he was shrewd enough to know he needed to tread carefully. He had set about gathering as much evidence as he could as to present a solid case to the king when the time was right. Jon studied the breeding patterns of dogs and sought out Robert's numerous bastards, including Gendry Waters, Edric Storm and Maya Stone, deciding to personally see to it that they were financially taken care of. Once he had gathered everything he required, Littlefinger made his move before Jon could make his. His last words, therefore, were perhaps a desperate bid to point King Robert Baratheon in the right direction, but as we know, Robert had many other priorities. Stannis, of course, who also knew the truth, immediately left for Dragonstone to regroup, as not to befall a similar fate to Jon. The impact Jon Arryn's death has had on the entire series has inspired me to create another video as a complement to this one based on the hypothetical scenarios that may have arisen had his murder not been successful, and how this could have affected the major players in the Game of Thrones. I'm in the process of writing the script now, and your suggestions are most welcomed, so let me know what you have to say on this. As always, thank you, everyone, for your continued support of my channel. Over 22,500 subscribers in 6 months, and here's hoping to many more. So if you didn't hit the subscribe button already, give it a little tap, because I have so many more videos in the pipeline for this channel.